bone-deep chill sliced through the air as the clock struck past 2 a.m. on Pinewood Avenue, where Officer Marcus Hale eased his patrol car through the shadowed streets of Elmwood, Ohio. At 39 years old, Marcus had spent more than a decade patrolling these quiet suburban lanes, the cruiser's headlights casting long, ghostly beams across parked cars and darkened houses. The faint glow of porch lights flickered on a handful of lawns, but most homes lay shrouded in silence, their occupants lost to sleep, or perhaps something far worse. Before you immerse yourself in this gripping enigma, share where you're tuning in from and whether you'd risk everything for truth. Join our community by hitting the like button and subscribing to uncover every shocking revelation ahead. Marcus cherished the stillness of Elmwood's nights, a rare sanctuary in a world often marred by chaos, where the soft hum of crickets and the rustling leaves of towering pines along Pinewood Avenue offered a fleeting sense of calm. But tonight, that calm felt brittle, the kind of eerie midnight mystery that either signaled peaceful slumber or whispered of impending dread. He exhaled sharply, rolling his shoulders to dispel the creeping fatigue of a grueling shift, his thoughts drifting to the steaming coffee awaiting him back at the precinct. Just a quick stop, he mused, perhaps a moment to unwind before clocking out. Then a flicker of movement caught his eye. A small, shadowy figure emerged beneath a sputtering street lamp at the corner of Pinewood and Cedar Street, barely visible against the darkness. Marcus's hands tightened on the steering wheel, his foot instinctively easing off the gas as his sharp, seasoned gaze locked onto the child. She was young, no older than 6, standing motionless in the middle of the sidewalk, if clad only in a thin, pale nightgown that fluttered faintly in the cool breeze. Her dark, tangled hair obscured her face, and in one arm she clutched a teddy bear, its limp body dragging slightly against the pavement, its fur catching the faint, trembling light of the lamp. She wasn't running, wasn't crying, just stood there, an unsettling stillness radiating from her small frame, as if frozen in a moment of terror. If this haunting scene has already captured your curiosity, connect with our journey by subscribing now to delve deeper into the shadows of this unfolding mystery. Marcus's stomach clenched with a primal unease. This wasn't right. He pulled the cruiser over, shifted it into park, and stepped out. The night air cool but heavy, a stark contrast to the lingering warmth still rising from the asphalt. He left the driver's side door ajar, the police radio crackling softly with static and distant voices as he approached the girl with deliberate caution. The soft crunch of his boots on the pavement echoed in the silence, but the girl didn't react. Not a flinch, not a glance. Marcus kept his movements slow, measured, his years of training whispering that children wandering alone this late typically fell into 2 categories: scared or lost. This one was neither. She wasn't scanning the area, wasn't searching for help, just stood in place, gripping the stuffed animal like a lifeline, her small fingers curled so tightly into its faded fabric that her knuckles whitened. He crouched down a few feet away, his voice soft and steady, honed from countless encounters with frightened souls. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, his breath visible in the crisp night air. "Are you okay? What are you doing out here all alone?" The girl's wide, dark eyes flickered toward him, but she offered no answer. Her face was pale, her cheeks streaked with dirt, but it was her expression that chilled him to the core. She wasn't crying, wasn't afraid, just vacant, her gaze hollow, as if she'd witnessed horrors beyond her years. A cold shiver raced up Marcus's spine, his instincts roaring that this was no ordinary lost child. He glanced around, his sharp eyes sweeping the nearby houses. No movement, no porch lights flickering on, no sound of a frantic parent calling a child's name. No one was searching for her. His focus snapped back to her, and he softened his tone further. "What's your name?" Still nothing. Her arms tightened around the teddy bear, her fingers trembling, not from the cold, but from something deeper, something like shock or trauma. Marcus's pulse quickened, a steady drumbeat in his chest. He noticed her bare feet, dirty, slightly scraped, but showing no signs she'd walked far, which meant she likely hailed from one of the nearby homes. "Are you lost?" He tried again, his voice gentle but firm. No response. He studied her for a moment longer, the flickering street lamp casting eerie shadows across her delicate frame, then shifted slightly, his mind racing with dark possibilities. "Can I see your bear?" he asked, his tone calm but laced with curiosity. This time she reacted. Her fingers twitched, gripping the stuffed animal even tighter, as if it were her only anchor to reality. But then, slowly, deliberately, she lifted it toward him, her movements mechanical, almost robotic. She wasn't just letting him see it, she was handing it over. Marcus took it carefully, its weight heavier than it should have been, the fur rough and stiff under his fingertips. The moment he touched it, something felt wrong. The fur wasn't just dirty, it was matted, crusted with something dark. He lifted it closer, adjusting it beneath the street lamp's flickering glow, and his throat tightened. Blood. Not just a smear. Not a few spots. The teddy bear's fabric was stained with dried blood, too much for a simple scrape or cut. Marcus's training snapped into action, his heart pounding as he scanned the girl for injuries, checking her arms, her legs, anywhere she might be hurt. Nothing. She wasn't bleeding. So whose blood was on the bear? His jaw clenched, a wave of nausea rising in his gut. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice low and urgent. The girl shook her head, her dark eyes never leaving his, but the silence that followed was deafening, heavy with unspoken terror. Then why was she alone, barefoot, and holding a blood-stained teddy bear in the dead of night? Marcus flipped the bear over, running his thumb across its belly, and noticed the stitching. It looked off. Not a manufacturer's seam, but hand-stitched, sloppily done, as if someone had opened it up and sewn it shut again. A slow, creeping dread coiled in his gut. This wasn't just a lost child. It was the opening chapter of an eerie midnight mystery, hinting at a nightmare lurking nearby. He exhaled sharply, reaching for the radio clipped to his shoulder, his fingers trembling slightly with adrenaline. He was about to call for backup when the girl finally spoke, her voice so quiet he almost missed it over the static of the radio. "They're still in the house." Marcus's stomach dropped, his blood running cold as the weight of her words sank in, pulling him into the abyss of an unforgettable crime story that chills the soul, a secret that would unravel a deadly conspiracy stretching back 3 years. A suffocating dread enveloped Officer Marcus Hale as he crossed the threshold of the house on Pinewood Avenue, the metallic stench of blood slamming into him like a physical force in the oppressive silence of Elmwood's night. At 39 years old, Marcus's seasoned instincts, forged through years of patrolling Elmwood's quiet streets, screamed that he had stumbled into a gruesome suburban nightmare, far darker than any call he'd answered before. The faint creak of the slightly ajar front door echoed behind him, the only sound breaking the stillness as he drew his weapon and swept his flashlight across the entryway, its beam cutting through the gloom like a blade. The house appeared deceptively ordinary at first glance. Shoes neatly lined by the door, a jacket draped over a chair, a framed family photo on the wall showing a smiling couple with 2 children, their faces frozen in happier times. But the illusion shattered as Marcus ventured deeper, the flashlight revealing chaos in the living room. A lamp lay toppled, its shade cracked and bulb dark, casting jagged shadows across the hardwood floor. Shattered glass from fallen picture frames glittered like tiny, sharp stars, catching the light in a macabre dance. Then the smell intensified, thick and metallic, blood pooling silently, a silent testament to violence. Marcus's jaw tightened as he moved toward the kitchen, his boots silent on the polished wood. Through the open archway, he caught sight of her first. A woman in her mid-30s, slumped against the wall, legs sprawled awkwardly, head tilted forward in death. Blood had pooled beneath her, soaking into the grout between the tiles, dark and sticky, its sheen catching the faint glow of his flashlight. Her hand was curled toward her chest, fingers stiff and lifeless, her eyes still open, staring blankly at nothing. Marcus forced himself to breathe, his training anchoring him as he scanned the room for signs of struggle. There were none. No overturned chairs, no broken dishes, just the chilling precision of a calculated attack. Whoever did this hadn't acted in haste. They'd been deliberate, methodical, and cold. A soft creak overhead made Marcus's gun snap upward, every muscle in his body tensing. He held his breath, listening intently, but the sound was only a ceiling fan spinning lazily above, its blades casting eerie, elongated shadows across the walls. He exhaled slowly, steadying his grip, and stepped back into the hallway, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. The stairs loomed ahead, a dark ascent into unknown horror, and he climbed them one deliberate step at a time, the floorboards groaning faintly under his weight, each creak amplifying the tension. At the top, a dim glow spilled from a partially open doorway, casting a thin sliver of light into the hall. Marcus approached, his heart pounding a steady, heavy rhythm, gun raised, breath shallow and controlled. He nudged the door open with the barrel of his weapon and froze. A man in his 40s lay on his back near the foot of the bed, a gunshot wound to the chest, blood seeping into the carpet, dark, thick, and final. His face was contorted, frozen in a mid-expression of shock or pain, eyes staring blankly at the ceiling, unseeing. A stuffed animal lay nearby, its small, furry arms stained red, matching the blood on the teddy bear Marcus had taken from Olivia downstairs. His breath came slow and measured, but his stomach twisted with revulsion and dread. Then his flashlight shifted, illuminating the bed. Two smaller forms, a boy perhaps 10 and a girl slightly younger, lying side by side, still and silent. No signs of struggle, no cries, no resistance, just the same cold, precise violence that marked the parents' deaths. Marcus swallowed hard, dragging a shaky hand down his face, the weight of the scene pressing down on him like a vice. Who were these people, the Parker family? And why was Olivia, the little girl in his patrol car, the only one left alive? He turned abruptly, retracing his steps down the hall, down the stairs, and out the door, his mind racing with unanswered questions. The moment he stepped onto the porch, his eyes flicked toward the patrol car parked a few houses down beneath a towering pine. Olivia sat exactly where he'd left her, still clutching the teddy bear tightly, her small frame eerily silent, her dark eyes fixed on the house, unblinking. Marcus exhaled, trying to steady the tremor in his hands, but a single, chilling thought surfaced in his mind. Why was she the only one left alive? And worse, who had she been hiding from? The night fell silent again, the weight in Marcus's chest heavier than ever, the flicker of his flashlight on the blood-streaked walls of the Parker home etching itself into his memory. Backup was on the way, but for the first time in his career, Marcus didn't want to wait. He needed answers, and the blood-stained teddy bear in Olivia's hands held the key to a gruesome suburban nightmare, marking the beginning of an unforgettable crime story that chills the soul. A secret that would unravel a deadly conspiracy stretching back 3 years. A chilling revelation struck Officer Marcus Hale as the fluorescent lights of Elmwood's precinct buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glow on the chaos unfolding around him. A gruesome suburban nightmare, now etched into his mind from the massacre on Pinewood Avenue. At 39 years old, Marcus's instincts, sharpened by years patrolling Elmwood's quiet streets, told him the blood-stained teddy bear, clutched by Olivia Bennett, held the key to a mysterious child abduction case that would unravel far beyond the Parker family's deaths. The precinct hummed with activity. Ringing phones, officers barking orders, the clatter of keyboards, but Marcus barely noticed, his focus locked on the evidence before him. He stood on the precinct's front porch earlier that morning, watching as the coroner zipped up the last body bag from the Parker home, the weight in his chest growing heavier with each passing moment. Red and blue lights still flashed across Pinewood Avenue, forensic teams combing the house for clues, their gloved hands sifting through blood and debris. Marcus turned as a car door slammed behind him. Detective Clara Brooks striding up the driveway, her expression unreadable. At 40 years old, Clara was sharp-eyed, no-nonsense, a veteran detective who'd seen the worst of Elmwood's underbelly but never took anything for granted. Marcus had worked with her before. She didn't waste time. "You just found her wandering?" Clara asked, stopping beside him, her gaze flicking toward the patrol car where Olivia sat, still silent, still clutching the teddy bear like a lifeline. Marcus exhaled, his breath fogging in the early morning chill. "Yeah, no shoes, no jacket, just walking in the middle of the night," he said, his voice steady but heavy with unease. Clara frowned, her brow furrowing, but she didn't press further. Marcus shook his head, gesturing toward the bear. "Not until she handed me the bear." Clara's gaze locked onto the dark, dried stains on the teddy bear's fur, now sealed in an evidence bag on the precinct counter. She swore under her breath, her sharp mind already racing. The bear was immediately taken to the forensic van, where Brian Foster, a meticulous tech in his early 30s, examined it under bright white lights. His gloved fingers ran over the stitching, pausing at a small lump beneath the fabric. "Something's inside," he muttered, grabbing a scalpel and carefully slicing along the rough, uneven stitching. As he peeled back the fabric, the mood in the van shifted. Brian's face went rigid. Inside the stuffing, wedged between layers of cotton, was a human fingernail, broken and embedded deep, with dried blood clinging to its edges. Clara, standing just outside the van, stiffened. "That wasn't an accident," she said, her voice low and grim. Marcus felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. Whoever that fingernail belonged to, they hadn't just touched the bear. They'd fought for their life. "Get this processed immediately," Clara ordered, her tone sharp. "And run the blood. I want to know whose it is." Brian nodded, already sealing the evidence bag, his movements precise but hurried. Clara exhaled, rubbing her temple before glancing back at the patrol car, where Olivia sat, still holding on to the bear's absence, as if she didn't realize it was gone, or didn't care. An hour later, the IDs came in. The bodies belonged to David and Laura Parker, along with their children, Ethan, 10, and Sophia, 8. A normal family with no criminal records, no hint of why someone would want them dead. But Olivia? No record of her. "She's not in the system," Clara said, flipping through the files at her desk in the precinct, her fingers drumming against the pages. "No birth certificate, no medical records. As far as official documents go, she doesn't exist." Marcus frowned, his mind racing back to the night on Pinewood Avenue. "She told me her name was Olivia Bennett," he said, his voice tight with frustration. "Doesn't mean she's theirs." Clara nodded, already dialing a neighbor for questioning. An elderly woman in her 60s, who had lived next door to the Parkers for over a decade, was brought in. "Did you ever see this girl before?" Clara asked, sliding a photo of Olivia, taken in the patrol car, across the table. The neighbor hesitated, glancing at the image, her eyes narrowing. "Not often," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "I mean, I saw her a couple of times, peeking out of the upstairs window, but every time I waved, she disappeared. I just assumed she was shy." Marcus and Clara exchanged a look, the pieces of the puzzle shifting into place. "How long ago was the first time you saw her?" Marcus pressed, leaning forward. The woman frowned, thinking. "Maybe 3 years," she said finally. Clara's expression darkened. 3 years. If Olivia wasn't biologically part of the Parker family, where had she come from? Back at the crime scene, Marcus and Clara returned to the Parker house, the forensic team still at work. Olivia remained eerily unresponsive, sitting in the patrol car, her dark eyes fixed on nothing. Then, as they sat her at a table in the precinct with a notepad, she picked up a crayon, her small hands moving carefully. Marcus and Clara watched transfixed as she sketched straight lines, a square, a tiny rectangle inside it. "What is that?" Clara asked, her voice soft but urgent. Olivia didn't answer. Marcus leaned in, studying the drawing. "Is this a door?" he asked. Olivia nodded, her expression unchanged. Marcus and Clara exchanged another glance, the sketch's simplicity belying its significance, a hidden door. Minutes later, Marcus was upstairs in the Parker home with 2 uniformed officers scanning the walls of the master bedroom. If Olivia had been hidden in this house, she had to have been somewhere. Near the bookshelf, he noticed a faint scratch along the baseboard, too uniform to be accidental. He pressed against the bookshelf, and it moved with a low, grinding creak. The entire unit swung outward, revealing a crawl space behind it. The air inside was stale, dust-filled but unmistakably lived in. A thin mattress lay against the wall, surrounded by old food wrappers, children's drawings, and a single worn blanket. Someone had been staying here, and it wasn't recent. Clara stepped beside him, her expression unreadable, her flashlight sweeping the cramped space. "She was hiding," Marcus murmured, his voice low, the weight of the discovery sinking in. His gaze dropped to the wooden beams above the mattress, where 2 initials were scratched into the wood. O.B. A chill ran through him. Olivia Bennett, he thought, but even as he said it, a nagging doubt crept in. Olivia had been hidden away for 3 years, but why? And if she wasn't really a Parker, who was she? The answer lay buried in this cramped space, a clue to a mysterious child abduction case that would pull Marcus deeper into an unforgettable crime story that chills the soul, a secret tied to a deadly conspiracy stretching back 3 years. A gut-wrenching realization hit Officer Marcus Hale as he stared at the flickering monitor in Elmwood's precinct, the harsh glow illuminating a decades-long corruption scandal that threatened to engulf the quiet town he'd sworn to protect. At 39 years old, Marcus's instincts, honed by years of patrolling Elmwood's peaceful streets, screamed that the initials OB, scratched into the Parker home's crawlspace, were the key to unraveling a mystery far deeper than the massacre on Pinewood Avenue. The precinct buzzed with the usual hum of activity: ringing phones, officers typing furiously, the occasional shuffle of papers, but Marcus barely registered it, his focus locked on the digital files sprawled across his screen. He sat at his cluttered desk, the weight of the past 24 hours pressing down on his broad shoulders, the image of Olivia Bennett's vacant eyes haunting him. The blood-stained teddy bear, now locked in evidence, whispered secrets he couldn't yet decipher, but the discovery of the crawlspace had ignited a fire in his gut. Marcus leaned back, rubbing his jaw as he opened his laptop, diving into missing persons cases from 3 years ago. The search took time, the system's hum filling the silence, but then a match appeared. Lena Carter and her 5-year-old daughter, Olivia Bennett, vanished 3 years prior from their home in Cleveland, Ohio, just a few hours' drive from Elmwood. Marcus straightened, his pulse quickening as the case file loaded. A photo of Lena, a woman in her early 30s with dark hair and sharp, determined eyes, stared back at him, alongside a picture of a smiling Olivia, her auburn pigtails pristine, her face free of the dirt and fear Marcus had seen on Pinewood Avenue. The report was sparse but chilling. Lena and Olivia had disappeared the night Lena's husband, Daniel Carter, was murdered. Officially, it was ruled a robbery gone wrong, but the details raised red flags. Daniel, a federal prosecutor, had been building a case against powerful figures, including high-level government officials and corporate executives, when he was gunned down in his Cleveland office. Marcus's jaw tightened, his mind racing as he flagged the file for deeper analysis. He glanced at Detective Clara Brooks, who sat across the room, her sharp eyes scanning her own screen. At 40 years old, Clara's no-nonsense demeanor and years of experience made her the perfect partner for this nightmare. "Clara," he called, his voice low but urgent. She looked up, her brow furrowing as she crossed the room. "What have you got?" she asked, leaning over his shoulder. Marcus pointed to the screen. "Olivia Bennett, our girl from Pinewood. She disappeared with her mother, Lena Carter, 3 years ago after her father, Daniel, was killed. He was a federal prosecutor working on a corruption case." Clara's expression darkened, her fingers tapping against the desk. "A robbery gone wrong, huh?" she muttered skeptically. "That's convenient." For the next hour, Marcus and Clara dug into Daniel's case, pulling up records, witness statements, and news archives. Daniel had been targeting a network of corruption involving billions in government contracts, with one name recurring in the margins: Ronald Pierce, a shadowy figure with ties to defense contractors and elite circles. The timeline fit. Daniel was murdered, Lena and Olivia vanished, and 3 years later, Olivia reappeared in Elmwood, hidden in the Parker home. Only for the family to be slaughtered. But why? Clara leaned back, crossing her arms. "We need to connect the dots," she said, her voice firm. If Daniel was onto something big, and Lena ran to protect Olivia, someone powerful wanted them silenced. Marcus nodded, his mind already racing to the next step. He turned to the forensic reports on Victor Brooks, the hitman they suspected killed the Parkers. Victor, a career criminal with a rap sheet of home invasions and assaults, had been found dead in a trailer park outside Elmwood just days before the Parker massacre. Another loose end tied up. Marcus pulled up Victor's financials, his fingers flying across the keyboard. A $25,000 deposit appeared in Victor's account the day before his death, traced to an offshore account linked to Blackthorn Security, a private firm known for off-the-books operations, including assassinations for powerful clients. "Clara, look at this," Marcus said, pointing to the screen. Victor was paid by Blackthorn to take out the Parkers, but someone silenced him afterward. Probably the same people who ordered the hit. Clara's eyes narrowed, her mind piecing together the puzzle. "Blackthorn doesn't mess around," she said, her voice cold. "They're hired by people with power, government, corporations, elites. If they're involved, this isn't just about the Parkers. It's about Daniel's case. Marcus nodded, his stomach twisting as he scrolled through Blackthorn's sparse public records. Allegations of black ops, no convictions, a ghost in the system. Then, a chilling detail emerged. A text message on Victor's phone sent minutes before his death from an untraceable number. The words glowed on the screen. "You should have killed the girl too." Marcus's blood ran cold, the weight of the words sinking in. Olivia wasn't just a survivor, she was a target, a living threat to whoever had orchestrated this decades-long corruption scandal. If Blackthorn and Ronald Pierce believed she could expose them, no one was safe. Not Olivia, not Lena, and certainly not Marcus and Clara if they got too close. The precinct's hum faded into the background as Marcus stared at the screen, the pieces falling into place. Olivia's survival, the Parkers' deaths, Daniel's murder, it all pointed to a conspiracy that had been brewing for years, pulling Marcus into the heart of an unforgettable crime story that chills the soul, a nightmare that would reveal the true cost of justice. A deafening explosion of gunfire shattered the silence as Officer Marcus Hale stepped out of the unmarked police car, the damp, pine-heavy air of the Appalachian Mountains in Ohio pressing down on him like a vice. At 39 years old, Marcus's instincts, forged by years patrolling Elmwood's quiet streets, screamed that he'd walked into a tense mountain showdown that could end in disaster or redemption. The remote cabin loomed ahead through the fog, its dark silhouette stark against the towering pines. No lights, no movement, just an oppressive stillness that masked the danger lurking within. Marcus and Detective Clara Brooks had driven nearly 2 hours from Elmwood, following a lead on Lena Carter's hideout, a rural property purchased in cash 2 years ago under an alias, deep in the Appalachian wilderness, miles from the nearest town. They'd pieced together the clues from utility records, bank traces, and Lena's faint digital footprint, but the isolation of the cabin set Marcus on edge. He drew his weapon, the cold metal steady in his grip as he scanned the perimeter, the crunch of gravel under his boots muffled by the thick fog. Clara followed, her sharp eyes sweeping the shadows, her own gun at the ready. "Looks deserted," she whispered, her voice low but tense. The cabin's front door was locked, its weathered wood showing signs of neglect, but no recent activity. Marcus exchanged a glance with Clara, then stepped back and kicked the door open with a resounding crack. Inside, the air was stale, dust hanging heavy, but not abandoned. His flashlight swept across the space, a thin mattress in the corner, a few canned goods on a rickety shelf, a burner phone charging on a counter. It screamed dark. Then, on a wooden table, something caught his eye. A child's drawing, simple but haunting, a woman and a little girl holding hands, with "Mommy and me" scrawled in uneven handwriting beneath. Marcus's grip on his gun tightened, the image of Olivia Bennett flashing through his mind. Lena had been here recently. Clara checked the counter, running a gloved hand over the dust. "This isn't old," she said, her voice firm. "She was here." But before Marcus could respond, a sharp click echoed from outside, followed by a hail of bullets tearing through the wooden walls, shattering the cabin's windows in a cacophony of splintering glass and splintering wood. Marcus grabbed Clara, yanking her behind the overturned table as gunfire erupted, the sharp cracks reverberating through the small space. The front door burst open, and 3 men in dark tactical gear and masks stormed in, weapons raised, their movements precise and deadly. Blackthorn security? Marcus realized, his heart pounding. He fired first, 2 quick shots dropping 1 man to the floor, blood pooling beneath him. Clara took out the second with a single, clean shot, but the third moved fast, diving behind the couch and returning fire, bullets whizzing past Marcus's head. He ducked, his pulse hammering, the acrid smell of gunpowder filling the air. "They knew we'd come," Clara gritted out, reloading her weapon, her face set with determination. "Then we finish this," Marcus replied, his voice cold and steady as he aimed and fired, catching the masked man as he peeked over the couch. The intruder crumpled, dead before he hit the ground, not by Marcus's shot, but by a shotgun blast from the shadows. Marcus turned, gun still raised, and saw a woman step forward, shotgun still smoking, her face hard with exhaustion and fury. She was tall and lean, her dark hair pulled back, her eyes locking onto Marcus and Clara with a mix of suspicion and desperation. It was Lena Carter, Olivia's mother, her presence confirming their suspicions. "Lena Grayson?" Clara asked, lowering her gun slowly, her voice cautious. Lena's grip on the shotgun tightened, her voice hoarse and raw. "Where's my daughter?" she demanded, her gaze flicking to the drawing on the table. Marcus held up the blood-stained teddy bear still sealed in its evidence bag from Pinewood Avenue. "She survived," he said, his tone urgent. "But we need answers now." Lena's shoulders sagged, the shotgun lowering slightly, tears brimming in her eyes but held back by sheer resolve. "She saw it all," Lena whispered, her voice breaking. "The night Daniel was murdered, Olivia was there. She saw his killers, and they'd been hunting us ever since." For the next hour, as the SWAT team from Elmwood secured the area and Blackthorn's operatives were processed, Marcus and Clara listened to Lena's story in the cabin's dim light. Daniel Carter, a federal prosecutor, had been building a case against a corruption network led by Ronald Pierce, involving billions in government contracts and elite figures. The night he was killed, Olivia, then 3 years old, had witnessed the murder, frozen in the dark as Ronald ordered, "No loose ends." Lena had grabbed Olivia and fled, living off the grid, hiding her daughter to keep her safe. 3 years ago, she entrusted Olivia to her best friend, Laura Parker, hoping the suburban anonymity of Elmwood would shield her. But Blackthorn found them, slaughtering the Parkers and nearly killing Olivia. Marcus's stomach churned as Lena's words sank in, the pieces aligning with the forensic evidence. The fingernail and the teddy bear, Victor Brooks's hit, the text message threatening Olivia. But the revelation didn't end there. As they prepared to leave, Marcus noticed the teddy bear again, its uneven stitching catching his eye. He ran his fingers over the seams, pressing into the fabric, feeling something solid inside. "Clara," he said, his voice tense. Clara handed him a pocket knife, and Marcus carefully sliced along the stitching. As he peeled the fabric apart, a small metallic object tumbled onto the table. A memory card. Lena gasped, her face paling. "No," she whispered, her hands trembling. Marcus and Clara exchanged a look, then turned to her. "You knew about this?" Marcus asked, his tone sharp but measured. Lena hesitated, then nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Not at first," she admitted. "But after I realized they were still coming for us, I suspected." Marcus frowned, his mind racing. "Start from the beginning. How did this get inside Olivia's bear?" Lena took a deep breath, her voice steadying. "Because my husband put it there." Daniel knew he was being watched. He was working on the biggest case of his career. Corruption, bribery, high-level government figures. He told me he had enough to end careers. Marcus inserted the memory card into Clara's laptop, a single audio file appearing on the screen. Clara clicked play, and static crackled before 2 voices emerged, one calm and controlling, the other nervous and hesitant. Then, clear as day, Ronald Pierce's voice cut through. "You don't get to have second thoughts about this. You took the money, that means you're in." The second voice, lower and trembling, replied, "I didn't sign up for executions." Ronald laughed, cold and sharp. "You think this is about one man? We're talking billions in contracts. You don't get cold feet now." A pause, then the second voice asked, "And Grayson?" Ronald's voice dropped, icy and firm. "His case disappears. He disappears." Lena's breath hitched, her hands clenched into fists. Marcus's grip on the table tightened, the recording's implications sinking in. This was the kill order for Daniel, the root of the conspiracy. The static crackled again as the second voice asked, "And his wife? She'll run." Ronald replied, "But we'll find her." The recording ended, leaving the cabin in stunned silence. Clara leaned back, her expression grim, while Marcus exhaled slowly, his mind racing. This was the proof Daniel died for, but it wasn't enough. Ronald Pierce was powerful, with connections and influence. This recording alone wouldn't bring him down, not when he had allies willing to cover for him. Yet, it marked a turning point in a tense mountain showdown, pulling Marcus deeper into an unforgettable crime story that chills the soul. A revelation that would ignite the final battle for justice. A thunderous crack of gunfire shattered the stillness as Officer Marcus Hale gripped the steering wheel of an unmarked SUV, his eyes locked on the small house across the quiet street in Elmwood suburbs. A high-stakes suburban ambush poised to unfold at any moment. At 39 years old, Marcus's instincts, sharpened by years on Elmwood's streets, knew this decoy safe house was a powder keg, ready to ignite a confrontation that could end in triumph or tragedy. The warm glow of porch lights flickered on nearby homes, but the target house, where Lena Carter and Olivia Bennett waited under surveillance, stood dark, its windows veiled, hiding the tension within. Marcus and Detective Clara Brooks had spent the past 48 hours setting the trap, leaking carefully crafted information to Blackthorn Security and Ronald Pierce, that Olivia remembered everything from the night her father, Daniel Carter, was murdered 3 years ago. The memory card from the teddy bear, with Ronald's voice ordering Daniel's death, had provided the leverage they needed, but it also painted a target on Olivia's back. Marcus exhaled slowly, his hands steady on the wheel, the weight of the plan pressing down on him. SWAT units from Elmwood were stationed nearby, hidden in the shadows, and FBI agents monitored every move through the house's surveillance system. They were ready, but so was Ronald. Clara sat beside him, her gun resting on her thigh, her face tense in the dim dashboard light. "You think he's really going to show?" she asked, her voice low but edged with anticipation. Marcus's jaw tightened, his gaze unwavering. "He's got no choice," he replied, his voice cold and resolute. "Vance, Pierce has spent 3 years tying up loose ends. The Parkers, Victor Brooks, anyone who'd connect him to Daniel's murder and the corruption case that threatened his empire. Now he thinks Olivia's the last threat left." Clara nodded, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Then we wait." Headlights appeared down the street, and Marcus's body tensed, his radio crackling softly with static. "Here we go," he muttered, his grip tightening on the wheel. A black SUV pulled up outside the house, its engine cutting off with a low growl. 4 men in dark tactical gear stepped out, weapons in hand, their movements precise and coordinated. Blackthorn operatives, just as Marcus had predicted. Then Ronald Pierce emerged, his tall frame unmistakable, his silver hair glinting under the streetlights, his face set with a cold determination. Clara swore under her breath. "He came personally," she said, her voice sharp with surprise. "He's desperate." Marcus reached for his radio, his voice steady but urgent. "All units, stand by. Suspects are moving." The tension in the air thickened, the quiet suburban street now a battlefield in waiting. Ronald gestured toward the house, and his men advanced, their boots silent on the pavement as they approached the front door. Marcus held his breath, counting the seconds. Then, in an instant, the trap sprang. A flashbang detonated at the door, a blinding explosion of light and sound that stunned the intruders, throwing them off balance. SWAT and FBI agents swarmed from the shadows, gunfire erupting in a cacophony of chaos, bullets ripping through the night. Marcus and Clara were already out of the SUV, weapons raised, moving with practiced precision. The first gunman went down before he could fire, a clean shot from a SWAT sniper. Another tried to retreat, but a well-placed bullet from Clara took him out. Ronald, realizing the ambush, turned to run, his eyes wide with panic as he bolted toward his SUV. Marcus saw it unfolding in slow motion, the desperation in Ronald's face, the realization that his empire was crumbling. He sprinted after him, tackling Ronald before he could escape, the two crashing to the ground in a tangle of gravel and grit, the impact jarring Marcus's bones. Ronald struggled, but Marcus was stronger, twisting the man's arms behind his back and pinning him down, his knee pressing into Ronald's spine. "It's over, Pierce," Marcus growled, yanking out his cuffs and securing Ronald's wrists. Ronald let out a ragged breath, then chuckled, a low, humorless sound that sent a chill through Marcus. "You don't understand," Ronald sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. "The people I work for, they'll bury you." Marcus pressed the barrel of his gun to the back of Ronald's head, his voice icy. "And you don't understand what happens when you mess with a kid." Red and blue lights flashed across the neighborhood as SWAT officers moved in, securing Ronald's men, dead or in custody. Marcus pushed Ronald against a police car, his hands cuffed tightly behind his back, the man's smirk fading as reality set in. Inside the house, Lena and Olivia were unharmed, their safety confirmed by the SWAT team, but the tension lingered. Marcus glanced toward the porch, where Olivia stepped out, clutching the teddy bear, her small frame steady despite the chaos. Ronald's gaze shifted to her, and a twisted smirk curled his lips. "It's almost funny," he muttered. "That kid won't even remember what happened." Something snapped in Olivia's mind. Her fingers tightened around the bear, her breath hitching as memories flooded back. A warm living room, the soft glow of a lamp, her father's voice on the phone, low and tense. "Daniel Grayson, I have proof. It's Pierce. I have everything I need." A knock at the door, Daniel stiffening, his eyes flicking to the window, headlights in the distance. "Go upstairs, sweetheart." "Now," he'd said, his voice firm but panicked. Olivia hadn't moved, frozen as the door burst open, gunfire erupting, blood staining the floor, her father falling. One of the men hesitated. "What about the kid?" Another figure stepped inside, tall, dark-suited, cold-eyed, Ronald Pierce. His voice was flat, emotionless, no loose ends. Olivia looked up, meeting his gaze, trembling but unable to scream. Olivia gasped, her small body shaking, her dark eyes locking onto Ronald's. "You killed my father," she said, her voice strong and clear, cutting through the night like a blade. Ronald's smirk vanished, the color draining from his face, his fingers clenching against the car's hood. Marcus's grip on the cuffs tightened, the past no longer buried. Ronald was finally facing the consequences of his actions. But the stakes of this high-stakes suburban ambush pulled Marcus deeper into an unforgettable crime story that chills the soul, a victory tinged with the shadow of lingering threats from Ronald's powerful allies. A lingering shadow of doubt crept over Officer Marcus Hale as he pulled his unmarked car into the quiet street of Elmwood Heights, the warm glow of a porch light illuminating Lena Carter and Olivia Bennett's new home. A beacon of hope, yet tinged with the echo of a past that refused to fully fade. At 39 years old, Marcus's instincts, forged by years patrolling Elmwood's peaceful streets, whispered that even victory carried a cost. A heartwarming suburban redemption marred by the specter of unresolved threats. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawns, the neighborhood a picture of normalcy. But Marcus's gut tightened as he stepped out, the memory of Ronald Pierce's smirk lingering in his mind. It had been 3 months since Ronald's conviction. Life in prison without parole for conspiracy, murder, and orchestrating the Parker family's slaughter. The courtroom drama had ended with Olivia's unwavering testimony, her voice steady as she recounted Ronald's chilling words, no loose ends, shattering his composure and ensuring justice for Daniel Carter, the Parkers, and herself. Yet as Marcus approached the tidy 2-story house, the weight of the case pressed down on him, a nagging sense that powerful allies of Ronald might still lurk in the shadows. Lena greeted him at the door, her face softer now, the exhaustion and fear replaced by a cautious gratitude. At 33 years old, she looked younger than the haggard woman Marcus had met in the Appalachian cabin, her dark hair neatly tied back, her eyes warm but wary. "Marcus, thank you for coming," she said, stepping aside to let him in. Olivia peeked out from behind her, her small frame now filled with a tentative joy, her dark hair bouncing as she ran toward him, clutching the familiar teddy bear. At 6 years old, Olivia's laughter echoed through the house, a sound Marcus hadn't heard during the chaos of Pinewood Avenue, a heartwarming suburban redemption after years of terror. The living room was cozy, sunlight streaming through the windows, toys scattered on the floor, a stark contrast to the blood-soaked horror Marcus had witnessed. Olivia stopped in front of him, holding out the teddy bear, its fur still worn but clean, the blood stains long gone. "You should keep him," she said, her voice small but steady, her dark eyes meeting his with a trust that made Marcus's chest tighten. He raised an eyebrow, crouching to her level. "Why, Olivia?" he asked gently. She smiled, a genuine, childlike grin. "He kept me safe," she said simply, her fingers lingering on the bear's frayed ear before letting go. Marcus hesitated, then took the bear, its weight heavier with meaning than its physical form. He turned it over in his hands, the uneven stitching a silent reminder of the memory card that had brought Ronald down. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. Lena watched from the doorway, tears brimming in her eyes, but she held them back, stepping forward to wrap an arm around Olivia. "She's finally free," Lena whispered, her voice breaking slightly. "You gave us that." Marcus nodded, standing to face them, but his mind drifted to the files on his desk, rumors of Blackthorn Securities connections, whispers of powerful figures still untouchable, their influence stretching beyond Ronald's fall. He forced a smile, clapping Lena on the shoulder. "You both deserve this peace," he said, but the unease lingered, a shadow he couldn't shake. Olivia ran back into the yard, her laughter filling the air as she chased a fluttering butterfly, her movements unburdened, A child finally allowed to be a child. Marcus watched her, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly, but his instincts whispered of unfinished business. As he turned to leave, Lena followed him to the porch, her expression grateful but cautious. "Marcus, I can't thank you enough," she said, her voice steady. "But, do you think it's really over?" Marcus paused, his hand on the car door, the teddy bear still in his grip. "I hope so," he said, his voice low. "But I'll keep an eye out, always." He climbed into the car, started the engine, and drove away, the bear resting on the passenger seat, its presence a quiet reminder of the justice they'd won, and the dangers that might still lurk. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting Elmwood Heights in twilight, and Marcus glanced back at the house in his rearview mirror, Olivia's laughter echoing faintly. She was safe now, he told himself, but a chill ran through him as he recalled the files on his desk. Anonymous tips about Blackthorn's remaining operatives, whispers of pressure from powerful elites. The victory felt complete, but the shadow of a potential threat lingered, pulling Marcus deeper into an unforgettable crime story that chills the soul. A resolution shadowed by the possibility of future danger.